The Dallas Cowboys last won a Super Bowl in 1995. They went 12-4, they won the NFC East, and they kind of walked their way to a Super Bowl. That was in 95. That was 4 years before I was even born. I'm 24 years old now, and I have witnessed one of the worst stretches among any sports franchise in history in my time on this earth by watching this godforsaken sports franchise. And after this latest loss once again to the godforsaken Green Bay Packers, I'm at wit's end. I think most fans are in the same boat as me, but I want to talk a little bit about my opinions and where I see the team going, where I think the team probably should go, and just overall the common issues that have arisen season after season, decade after decade under Jerry Jones' ownership. And that's my first point. Jerry Jones is the problem, and I truthfully do not think the Cowboys are going to find the success they've been looking for until Jerry Jones either removes himself as the general manager of the Cowboys and as the owner, or until he dies. And I don't say that lightly. I never wish for anybody's death, no matter who you are, unless you are the absolute worst scum of the earth. And I won't wish that on Jerry Jones because this is sports. But until he decides to relinquish general manager responsibilities and ownership to somebody else, this team is going nowhere. Because it's Jerry Jones. He's not going to relinquish general manager duties unless he is no longer the owner of the Cowboys, and he's definitely not doing that. His next in line is Stephen Jones, his son, to be the next owner of the team whenever Jerry does either pass away or just hand it off to his son due to old age or whatever. But since '89, when Jerry Jones first bought the team, he's been the GM ever since, and there has not been a general manager besides Jerry Jones under Jerry Jones. And when he took over the team, the first thing he did was probably the best thing he did for the football team, Dallas Cowboys. Not the franchise, not the business side, but the football team. He made the best choice he ever made in his first season by hiring Jimmy Johnson, who was 44-4 back in Miami through 4 years of coaching in college. He came over, sure went 1-15 in their first season, but ever since that, the Cowboys were fantastic with him. He won Coach of the Year in his second season. They drafted Emmitt Smith, who was Offensive Rookie of the Year. And then right after that season, in Jimmy Johnson's third year as the coach, that's when things went crazy. And that's when the Cowboys won 2 Super Bowls under Jimmy Johnson. And then Jerry made the worst choice he ever made by firing Jimmy Johnson because, as we all know, and if you don't, here is a Cowboys history lesson for you. Jimmy Johnson got a lot of the credit for the 90s. For the early 90s success that the Cowboys found, Johnson got most of the credit for it. And because Jerry Jones is narcissistic, he's an owner, they always want involvement in the team and they always want to get their kudos. He wasn't happy that Jimmy Johnson was getting all the credit for the team's success, and so Jimmy Johnson got fired. Now, these two butted heads before he got fired. They butted heads afterwards too, and we only just put Jimmy Johnson in the Ring of Honor this year, which is also just a terrible thing for Jerry Jones to have done. But after that, Barry Switzer came in. The Cowboys continued their success. He won another Super Bowl in '95, but that was the last time. That was the last time. Ever since then, we've had 27 years of unsuccessful football, 2.5 decades worth of some of the most obnoxious ends to seasons you'll ever see. And now talking about the current era of the Cowboys, the Mike McCarthy era. The last 3 years, the Cowboys have gone 12-5. They've been a really good regular season team. They've won the NFC East twice out of those 3 years under McCarthy. And Dak Prescott is coming off one of the best years of his career in the regular season. We drafted Micah Parsons in McCarthy's first year. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year. The team's been really good ever since McCarthy took over, at least in the regular season. But this is where the title of the episode comes from. It is the regular season Mike McCarthy Cowboys versus the postseason Mike McCarthy Dallas Cowboys. This team, this coach, they are rug pullers. The owner is a rug puller. The entire franchise, the organization, they are rug pullers. All they've done throughout my entire time as a fan, throughout the entire last 2 decades, is they make you think that they have one of the best rosters across the entire league, which may be true in most of these seasons, but they'll always tell you, we got one of the best rosters in football. Then you have a pretty back and forth regular season for the most part. In general, you're going to win most of your games. And then come playoff time, you completely and utterly collapse. You throw everything you learned from the regular season out to the wind, and you just lose the game. The Cowboys are 1-3 with McCarthy in the playoffs. And sure, 2 of these 3 losses have been one-score games, but both of them were to the 49ers, and both of them were games where we simply did not show up on either side of the ball. Now, granted, last year, the defense was solid in the playoffs, definitely, but they let the Niners and the Buccaneers both drive down the field time and time again and get themselves in scoring range. But the offensive side of the ball completely collapsed, at least in the first 2 years with McCarthy. The offense completely collapsed. Kellen Moore was the scapegoat, and I tagged him as the scapegoat as well. I blamed him for those losses too. We got rid of Kellen Moore. McCarthy takes over play calling. We come into 2023. The offense looks different. They're blowing people out, but they're only blowing teams out at home, and they're only blowing bad teams out at home too. Now, this was a major concern. Obviously, you play who you play. You don't decide your own schedule. But if you don't beat the good teams like the Bills, like the Eagles in that first matchup, or the Niners in that matchup, and you lose those games, you lose to the Cardinals as well in week 3 of the season, or week 2, or whatever it was, and they were a terrible team all year long. Losing those games was absolutely soul-crushing, and it showed you what was going to happen in the playoffs. The games that this team played at home in this 2023 season, they did not matter whatsoever. The only one that mattered was the one in the playoffs. And we obviously allowed 48 points, put up 32, half of which were in garbage time. And this was the ultimate season, the ultimate example of the Mike McCarthy era in Dallas. He's a rug puller. The roster is not as good as we thought they were. We always hype him up. We always hype him up. We always hype him up throughout the entire season, despite us seeing some very questionable losses. And then we're somehow surprised when we come out and perform the way we do in the playoffs. At least as fans, we're surprised. As a team, under Mike McCarthy, 12-5, 3 straight years. They can't escape the divisional round. 2 of your wild card losses, 2 of your playoff losses have been in the wild card now. And this time, Mike McCarthy was the play caller. He took over play calling for Kellen Moore this season after Kellen Moore left. We didn't bring him back. And the offense was one of the major issues in this game. So let's talk specifically about this playoff game against the Packers. Dan Quinn completely failed the team. He failed his players, and the players failed him too. There were wide open plays abound in this game, so many open throws for Love, and then when the Cowboys would bring pressure, Love was just simply amazing under pressure. What's crazy about this is that in this first half, this was evident. It was evident and clear that the pressure the Cowboys were bringing was not getting to Love. We did not have hardly any sacks on him in this game. I think maybe one. I don't have the box score in front of me, but every time the Cowboys brought pressure, the Packers had an easy throw, usually wide open. There would be a couple of throws that Love had off his back foot that were absolute dots, no doubt about it. He was fantastic in this game. He was lights out. But there were no adjustments by Dan Quinn or the Cowboys defense to adjust for the pre-snap motions, which has been killing us all year long. If you go back to the Bills game or the Dolphins game, the way those teams moved the ball was pre-snap motion. And this is what some of the players in the locker room after the game talked about. They talked about stubbornness on both sides of the ball in terms of scheming. And one player even said that the pre-snap motion was the thing that was killing them and that they weren't adjusting to it. Dan Quinn is supposed to be somebody up for head coaching jobs. He has been for the last 2 years. He stayed in Dallas, at least thankfully we thought for us. But then he comes around and does this game where they scored on every drive down the field except for once. I think they punted one total time in this game, not counting the fourth quarter. They scored touchdowns on 4 out of their first 5 drives. To allow that, you essentially give your offense no chance. You pretty much are forcing Dak to be absolutely perfect. And so now let's just talk about him. He was awful in this game. You know, he was an MVP candidate for most of the regular season. Had the one bad game against the Bills, I think, and then he was just completely written off from winning that, which I don't agree with that. But looking back on this game against the Packers in the playoffs, well, he does not deserve anything. I don't care what you do in the regular season, especially if you come out and do this in the playoffs. He was terrible in the first half. He was pressing. If his first read wasn't there, then he was panicking. He was forcing throws. He forced the one to Brandon Cooks, and it was off target, which that was a great play by Jair Alexander, yes. But that was still an off target throw for the smallest player on the field. He does not have any crazy arm length or anything. And Dak just threw a slightly off target pass. Alexander dove for it, made a really nice grab. Great hands. It leads to a touchdown, and it's 14-0 Packers. Then later on, Darnell Savage picks off Dak for the pick 6, and that throw, I don't care what anybody says, you're down by, 3 scores by that point, and you're trying to force some throws. That is a throw that you just cannot force. I don't care what quarterback you are, what team you're playing for, what the situation is, you cannot force a throw like that. There was no chance that that pass ever gets caught by CeeDee Lamb. That one is going the other way 9 times out of 10, as long as the defender makes the catch. And Savage did, and he walked in untouched. Literally untouched, pick 6, gone. And by that point, the game was lost. I've watched every game this year. Every single game this year I have watched from the opening kickoff right to the very end. And I have watched the vast majority of this season and all these seasons with 3 of my really close friends who are also Cowboys fans. And we all 4 of us have the same conclusion, at least for the past couple of seasons. The way the first 2 drives go in these games is going to tell you how the rest of the game is going to go. If the opponent scores on their opening drive, the Cowboys are losing 9 times out of 10. If the opponent scores on their opening drive and the Cowboys fail to score on their own opening drive, we're definitely losing. If the Cowboys get the ball first and they fail to score, and then the other team comes in and they fail to score, then anybody's game. But typically how it goes, the first drive for each team, if the Cowboys are losing after those first 2 drives, we're almost always going to lose. This year especially, when the Cowboys scored first, they were 10-0. When the opponent scores first, including playoffs, the Cowboys were 2-6. If that is not evidence enough of the issue with the Mike McCarthy Cowboys, I don't know what is. The team cannot play from behind. The team cannot fight through adversity. And they get outcoached time and time again. Just over these last 3 years, let's look at the coaches that we have lost to in the playoffs alone. Year 1, 12-5, lost in the wild card to the Niners. Head coach, Kyle Shanahan. Known across the entire league as one of the best play callers, the best coaches across the entire league. 2022, we take down Tampa. I forget who their coach was, but it was not anybody in note. I think it was Todd Bowles, actually. You beat them, you lose again to Kyle Shanahan, scoring less points than you did in the previous matchup against them. Mike McCarthy versus Kyle Shanahan, 0-2. Now we go into this year, 2023. Let's just throw in that 42-10 or whatever the score loss was against the Niners during the regular season. Another loss to Shanahan, got completely blown out. We go to the playoffs against the Packers, and you get blown out this time by Matt LaFleur. The only difference between the Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy eras is that the Garrett era was extremely inconsistent in terms of the record, but the result was always going to be the same. You knew that Jason Garrett was not going to lead this team to a Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy gave us false hope. I think I can speak for 95% of Cowboys fans when I say that all of us were skeptical when he was hired. He hadn't coached for at least 1 or 2 seasons, was fired in Green Bay, his only head coaching job previously, and he only won 1 time with Aaron Rodgers, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Had pretty solid rosters throughout, but did very similar things with the Packers as he has done these past 3 seasons with us. This is a franchise, an organization of rug pullers. There are so many people at fault, but the common denominator is Jerry Jones. We've done the exact same thing for 70% of our seasons in the last 2 decades. False hope, regular season. The quarterback gets a lot of flack for his interceptions. When they play well, they play well. When they don't, they are headliners. But the common issue across all the unsuccessful seasons is Jerry Jones. Questionable hires with Jason Garrett as head coach, Mike McCarthy as head coach, firing Jimmy Johnson, all of the above. All these things can be taken back to the Jones family and their lack of leadership and the lack of culture in the organization. There are players right now on the Cowboys defending Mike McCarthy post-game after this loss, and as a player for a coach, that makes sense. You're going to defend a guy that you played for over the past 3 years or just the past year. But it's time for McCarthy to go. I think he's proven that he is not a good enough coach to get it done when it matters the most, which is the playoffs. He's been outcoached 3 straight seasons. I think at this point, I'm comfortable having Dan Quinn leave. He can take a head coach job somewhere else as far as I'm concerned. This is a complete embarrassment. And as for offensive coordinator, what even was the plan with Brian Schottenheimer being promoted from within as the OC? Like, he has a horrible track record. I'm not sure what the ideal was there, but if we're going to clean house, you got to clean house. Send him packing too. Get a new head coach, OC, DC. Maybe once in a lifetime, Jerry relinquishes GM duties and actually gives it to either the head coach or an actual general manager. But the only way forward that I see is hiring somebody who can bring culture into your team, like Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, a coach like that. Mike McCarthy does not bring culture to a team. Now, players are defending him right now, and they're defending his culture and things like that. But what culture has he established? It's hard for fans to know because you only see post-game speeches and stuff from the locker room and snippets. But what culture has McCarthy brought? What culture did he have back in Green Bay? As far as I'm concerned, he does not seem like a very inspiring coach to play for. Sure, he can show you some good play calling sometimes, even though it can be a little bit inconsistent. But you can see culture in some teams. You see culture in New England. Their defense is always good. Belichick always has these guys playing hard defense, even though the offense sometimes sucks. Mike Vrabel, these guys want to play for him. He was a former player, so he knows what it's like. Dan Campbell, similar story. The Lions players love this guy. He is hype after every game. He gets them excited to play. He has balls of steel. Mike McCarthy, I haven't seen any ounce of culture. He's just another guy. He's just another coach that like all the rest, can do it in the regular season when the games don't matter as much. But then when the going gets tough and you're facing the best coaches, you'll lose the game. Because coaching matters just as much as the players on the field. And the coaching has completely failed this team. Mike McCarthy is not the only guy at fault here. Obviously, Dak is at fault here too. I don't think that he should be extended right now. I think we should wait on that until he runs out the course of this next contract, because we got to see him prove it with somebody else at head coach. If we bring in Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, and he still does not do it, then it's probably time to move on. But I think you've had two absolutely fraudulent head coaches, Jason Garrett, Mike McCarthy. They've been fraudulent. Dak has not played well in the playoffs, but maybe he will with an actual good coach. Who knows? I never thought McCarthy was a good coach. I thought it was always questionable. The Cowboys have led the league in penalties per game ever since he was the head coach. 3 straight years of this crap, by the way. That never got fixed. So what culture is there, and how can one be established? That is where the Cowboys need to look for this next season and for the next decade. You need a better coach that's going to be here for a long time that can establish a precedent of success. So that's all I got. Those are my thoughts. Pretty standard thoughts for a Cowboys fan after another awful end to a season, but that's how it goes. And I'm sure I'll be back here at the same time next year. I'll see you guys then. Peace.